What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Lex Blaze back at you again. Happy Friday, everybody. We're back with another video. Happy New Year. So let's get into this video, but before we get into this video, I was supposed to work on this video. This video was supposed to drop on the 6th of January, but on my community page I announced it like last year, but it didn't come out because my iPad was going crazy. So I hope my iPad won't go crazy this time, but I hope my iPad can hold a few longer. But so I'm back on the camera again, and we're doing a reaction video, vinyl reviews coming soon. But we're doing today, this reaction video is the complete history of the native tongues by Def Global. This is the video that we're gonna be watching today, and we're gonna be learning all about the native tongues, people. So I'm just gonna start the video right now before my iPad goes crazy, because my iPad doesn't have that much storage, so I need help. Alright, let's get into it.
Every album being released was setting the tone for what hip-hop would become going forward. One collective that became arguably the most important movement in all of hip-hop, started by a bunch of teenagers, can be traced directly to today, with artists like Kanye West, Tyler the Creator, and J. Cole. The collective that I'm referring to is, of course, the Native Tongues.
Native Tongues.
The name is perfect, referencing the lyrics to the New Birth song African Cry, and the artists rep the positive messaging of the universal Zulu nation, a group that used hip-hop to promote ideals of peace, love, unity, and having fun for all races, religions, and nations. Now, there have been many artists who were affiliated with the Native Tongues, so I'm going to break it down into tiers, just so that it's easier to keep track of everybody. So starting at tier 1, we have the core 3 groups, the Jungle Brothers, De La Soul, and A Tribe Called Quest. These 3 groups were so influential, helping to usher in the era of Afrocentrism and positivity in rap lyrics, and pioneering jazz rap through the use of sampling. The Jungle Brothers were the first of the groups to kick off. The members of the group, Mike G, Sammy B, and Africa Baby Bam, released the album Straight Out the Jungle in 1988. One of my favorite records of the 80s, the group's fun-loving rapping and eclectic sampling set the tone for what the Native Tongues would be all about. They met De La Soul that same year, when the groups were performing in Boston, and they immediately hit it off. The Jungle Brothers released their second album, Done by the Forces of Nature, in 1989, and it featured collaborations with Native Tongues members Q-Tip, Moni Love, and Vinny Mojica. And that's the best thing about the Native Tongues. Their collaborations brought life to whatever record they were on. All the members and their friends would record albums in the same studio, so while A Tribe Called Quest was recording their debut album, they would poke their head into the Jungle Brothers sessions, and the groups would share the creative flow. After the JBs and De La met, Africa Baby Bam called Q-Tip, and let him know that he found some kindred spirits. Q-Tip says, "I remember Africa called me that night, like 2 in the morning, and said, 'Yo, these kids, De La Soul, you gotta meet them. I swear we're just alike.' I went there, and it was just fucking love at first sight. It was disgusting." Hip-hop praises individuals Pasta Noose, Dave, Maceo, and Prince Paul released their first record 3 Feet High and Rising, and it would become the true coming out party for the Native Tongues. The album would double down on what the Jungle Brothers started, and became one of the greatest hip-hop albums in history, one that would change the course of hip-hop forever, with its explosive use of sampling. And it all culminated in the song Buddy, probably the single greatest contribution to hip-hop that the Native Tongues ever gave us. The remix to Buddy features De La Soul, Q-Tip, Phife Dawg, the Jungle Brothers, Queen Latifah, and Moni Love, which brings us to tier 2. The second-tier members of the Native Tongues consist of artists who were main members of the crew at one time, but either didn't last long or weren't a part of that initial 80s run. It consists of Queen Latifah, Moni Love, and Black Sheep. Starting out with Latifah and Moni, these two were the perfect solo MCs to rep the early days of the Native Tongues. They both exemplified the free love, empowerment, and confidence that the Native Tongues represented, and they were incredible MCs too. In this 1988 to 1991 range, these two were just as important as the Tier 1 groups. They just sort of fade out of the Native Tongue story once the 90s roll around. Latifah's debut record was a pinnacle of the Afrocentricity that the Native Tongues represented, and even had features from De La Soul along with Moni Love. Moni was an incredible MC, who actually hailed from London. Her style was so fun to listen to, and fit right in with the other core members of the crew. The song Ladies First, which featured both Queen Latifah and Black Sheep, is a group consisting of Drez and Mr. Long, and they called themselves Black Sheep because they felt like they were literally the black sheep of the Native Tongues. And they do often feel like an afterthought when people discuss the Native Tongues, but that shouldn't be the case. Their debut album, A Wolf in Sheep's Clothing, is one of my favorite albums of the 90s. It has some decade-defining songs. It even features Q-Tip, as well as the youngest Native Tongues member, Chi Ali, which brings us to Tier 3. The artists in Tier 3 were main collaborators with the Native Tongues throughout the collective's golden era, and were official members, but maybe didn't have the solo careers to help shape what the Native Tongues would become. You have Lucien Revolution, Vinia Mojica, Shorty No Mas, and Chi Ali, who I'll start off with here. Chi Ali was known for being one of the first young rap stars, releasing his first album when he was just 16 years old, and he was a voice to young rap fans with songs like Age Ain't Nothing But a Number. It's a common misconception that Ali was related to Drez from Black Sheep, but in reality the two just looked alike and formed a close bond. Chi Ali's first appearance was actually on the first Black Sheep record, but his debut album, The Fabulous Chi Ali, was a Native Tongues party. It was entirely
Shoot.
produced by the Beatnuts, except for one song, which was produced by Mr. Long of Black Sheep, and it featured guest appearances from Trugoy of De La Soul, Drez of Black Sheep, Fashion from the Beatnuts, and Phife Dawg from A Tribe Called Quest. Lucien Revolution is a French artist who has an interesting place in Native Tongues history, because outside of producing a couple songs for the Beatnuts in the 90s, he doesn't really have many collaborations with other Tongues members. That is, except for one song. A Tribe Called Quest had no official Native Tongues collaborations on their debut album, People's Instinctive Travels and the Paths of Rhythm, except for the song Luck of Lucien, a song dedicated to Lucien and featuring him speaking throughout. So Lucien is kind of a mystery to me, but this song alone means he deserves a spot here. The remaining two members of this tier are Vinia Mojica and Shorty No Mas, two artists who help carry on the tradition from Latifah and Moni Love as being strong female voices who can keep up with the best of the Native Tongues. Shorty No Mas was a central affiliate of the Native Tongues through the early 90s, and actually dated and lived with Phife Dawg for a few years, but her main contributions to the group came in 1993 on De La Soul's Balloon Mind State, adding some amazing touches onto what many consider to be a masterpiece of a record. Vinia Mojica is an amazing singer who was on Native Tongues records dating all the way back to the second Jungle Brothers album back in 1989 and into the 2000s with the Native Tongues' next generation like Common and Mos Def. That brings us to Tier 4, which consists of groups who were largely affiliated with the Native Tongues through the 90s, and sometimes were even referred to as official members, but never really repped the Native Tongues legacy. We have Fu-Schnickens, the Beatnuts, Brand Nubian, and the leaders of the New School. Starting off with Fu-Schnickens, a group that had a really good run of fun songs in the early 90s. Their debut album had a couple songs produced by A Tribe Called Quest, and even had a Phife Dawg feature on the song Losh Move. The group gets mentioned with other Native Tongues affiliates often, but aren't too involved in the greater Native Tongue narrative, so I'll move on. Next we have another group called the Beatnuts. They're often missed when people talk about the Native Tongues, but they're the most underappreciated group in Native Tongues history to me. Their members have actually stated that they feel like they're the actual black sheep of the Native Tongues. Their sound perfectly carries on the atmosphere and vibe that Tribe had, while incorporating their own wild attitude, and they were around the Native Tongues from close to the beginning. It was actually Africa from the Jungle Brothers who gave them their name, as they were originally called the Beat Kings, but he said that they were more like nuts, so it was changed to the Beatnuts, and the name stuck. One of their first production credits was for Moni Love, which brings Tiers 2 and 4 together here, and after that they produced almost an entire Chi Ali album, so they were some of the most important sound orchestrators of the second wave of Native Tongues releases. Juju of the Beatnuts even confirmed that in the early 90s, him, Q-Tip, and Pasta Noose were working on a secret group project called the Fabulous Fleas. Supposedly only a couple songs were ever made, but Juju claims that he still has them, so hopefully we'll be able to hear those someday. Keeping it with the groups, we then have Brand Nubian, who has a bit of a complicated history with the Native Tongues. At first glance, they seem like a group that would fit most with the Native Tongues Tier 1 members. The first albums were jazzy, some bad blood with Elias, but I'd argue has the best collaborations with the core members of this whole tier. The leaders of the new school are most known for being the group where Busta Rhymes got his start. And Busta is an interesting figure when talking about the Native Tongues, because while he would only be considered a member peripherally, he has collaborated with the Tribe Called Quest so much over the years that he, along with Consequence and Jay Dilla, could almost be thought of as the honorary 5th, 6th, and 7th members of Tribe. And that all started with his legendary verse on the posse cut from the Low End Theory called Scenario. Busta, along with the other members of the leaders of the new school, absolutely ripped their contributions on both Scenario and the Scenario remix. Scenario and its remix are two of the greatest posse cuts of all time, but it had potential to be even better, and could have been the Buddy remix of the 90s. On top of the two versions that were originally released, there also were demo versions recorded, with feature verses from Chris Lighty, who managed a lot of the Native Tongues groups, Pasta Noose of De La Soul, Mr. Long of Black Sheep, and Jarobi, who's the member of a Tribe Called Quest, who never rapped in a Tribe record until 2016. The Low End Theory is perfect as is, but I can't help but wonder what if they released the version with all those Native Tongues legends on it back then. Now, before we get into the other tiered members, I want to look at the timeline of the Native Tongues for a minute. Even when there weren't main groups in the Nitty, which is one of their best songs on the I Guess We Got Our Own Life to Live, or is it because we want our own kingdom to rule? Every now and then I step to the now. For now I see back then I may have acted a fool. Now I won't apologize for it. This is not a bunch of Brady's, but a bunch of black man's pride. So without recounting any specifics in detail, it seems like certain members of the Native Tongues let pride get the best of them, and there were some tiffs behind the scenes. And that's not to say that they were done working together completely, as Shorty No Mas and Drez of Black Sheep appeared on that very same album, and Dave from De La Soul was on Tribe's record award tour from that same year. But these collaborations felt like a bit of a last go at the first three tiers. Over, when Pasta News stated the equal, a meteor has more calling back to the through their music.
Are you tired of your music not getting the exposure and recognition it deserves? Are you fed up with your audience being...
And this album, Stakes is High, also helped usher in the final tier, which consists of affiliated members who started collaborating with the crew around that time. We have Mos Def, Truthy Nola, Jay Dilla, Da Bush Babies, Common, and The Pharcyde. Truthy Nola is far from a household name for Native Tongues fans, but his handful of collaborations with De La Soul are all still great. Starting with his work on Stakes is High, it was a really dope addition to the album. Stakes is High actually introduced a few Tier 5 members to the Tongues. First off was Common, an artist who was already off to a great start, with what would become one of the greatest solo rap careers of all time. But when he showed up on this record in 1996, it felt like he finally found his people. Common always felt like an extension of the Native Tongues, except he was in Chicago instead of New York. But at this point they finally linked, and Q-Tip had some features on Common albums for the next couple of years, so it really fit well. The other artist that Stakes is High brought to the forefront is Mos Def, an artist who again was already doing great things. Common, Mos Def, Jay Dilla, and Q-Tip went on to form the Soulquarians with many other like-minded artistic geniuses in the 2000s. The Soulquarians are often thought of as the spiritual next generation of the Native Tongues, but that might be a video for another day. And Tier 5 isn't done yet. The Bush Babies were an awesome group from the 90s, with some reggae influence as they were from Jamaica and Trinidad. Their debut album had some production from Tribes, Ali Shaheed Muhammad, and their best song in my opinion is The Love Song, which features Mos Def and was produced by De La Soul's Pasta Noose. And lastly, we have the only group on here from the West Coast, The Pharcyde. Now personally, I don't even think I would have included them on the list, because they don't have too many collaborations with Native Tongues core members. But Q-Tip specifically included them as members in an interview with BBC Radio, so I have to oblige. The inclusion of Pharcyde does make me want to include other West Coast acts like Hieroglyphics and Freestyle Fellowship, but the Pharcyde's best work was with Jay Dilla, so they are definitely closer affiliated with the Tongues and feel like West Coast equivalents to what the... But just because it was more rare, doesn't mean that the Native Tongues were completely extinct. To highlight a few special collaborations over the years, Q-Tip and Busta Rhymes kept a tight bond and even released a mixtape together as recently as 2014. And Jarobi, the mysterious fourth member of a Tribe Called Quest, who most people never heard rap until the 2016 Tribe album, actually released a heavily slept-on Native Tongues collaboration album in 2012. He and Dreza Black Sheep came together to become the group Evaton, which of course is native backwards, so they were able to keep the Native Tongue spirit alive. And since the Native Tongues were making timeless music, it's no surprise that artists are still inspired by their sound and aesthetic today. Let me know down in the comments if there was a tier 6 for the next generation of the Native Tongues.
Might
Who
be.
you think should
Next
be included.
generation might be.
I remember about a decade ago, a lot of people were saying that the East Coast movement was the new incarnation of the Native Tongues, or that Odd Future was carrying on the tradition out west, and maybe so, because all I know is that the music of the Native Tongues and what those artists stood for, that will live forever. Thanks for watching, everybody. This is what I'm calling the first video of Season 3 of my YouTube channel, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm trying to really take my time and step up the quality on these from now on, so hopefully you guys dig the new style. If you did and want to like the video and subscribe to the channel, that would be great.
Alright. Oh, yes sir, baby. I finally finished the whole video, and it's 60 minutes, so it's not that bad. Well, guys, that's it for today. The video will be dropping today, and the video is recorded and will be dropping today, everybody. It might be tomorrow, I don't care. I'm still going to drop this video today. So that is the complete history of the Native Tongues. More reaction videos coming soon. Also, fun fact, the 5 Dog Forever vinyl review side 1 and 2 are coming soon. Coming soon on your way, bro. So put your seatbelts on, cause we're gonna be going out of space. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to be back on the camera, man. It's Lex Blaze. It's Lex Blaze. Like and subscribe. I'm out. Peace. Oh, I didn't put the theme song on. That was my bad. I mean, the theme song ending, so my bad, but I'm about to waste time, so peace out, Lex Blaze, I'm out, like and subscribe.